There was a time when a mother's love was the most powerful force in the world, and most of us still believe that deep down. But what happened to one family on Family Feud would remind every single person in that studio, and millions watching at home, exactly what a mother's sacrifice really looks like. Before we go any further, if stories like this move you, if you believe that real love and real courage deserve to be seen, hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a moment like this one. Steve Harvey has hosted Family Feud for over a decade. He has seen tears, he has seen shock, he has seen moments that stopped the show cold. But when 24-year-old Marcus Webb stepped up to the Fast Money podium on a warm Thursday afternoon, Steve had no idea that the next 20 minutes would leave him standing in the middle of that stage with tears running down his face, and no words left to say. This is the story of a mother who sold everything she had, her jewelry, her car, her furniture, to keep her son alive, and the moment the whole world found out, Marcus Webb was 24 years old, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. He was the kind of young man who coaches called a natural leader, not because he was the loudest in the room, but because he was the most dependable. In high school, he worked part-time at a grocery store after practice every single day so he could help his mother pay the electric bill. He never complained. He never asked for anything in return. That was just Marcus. His mother, Diane Webb, had raised him alone since he was 6 years old. His father left when Marcus was still learning to ride a bike, and Diane made a quiet decision that day. She would be enough. She worked 2 jobs for most of Marcus's childhood, days at a laundromat, evenings at a hospital cafeteria. She missed school plays. She missed some birthdays, but she never missed a single bill payment, and she never let Marcus go to bed hungry. Their home was small, a 2-bedroom rental in a neighborhood that had seen better days. But Diane kept it spotless. She had a collection of gold bangles her own mother had given her, passed down through the family. She kept them in a velvet box on her dresser. She never wore them. She said she was saving them for when Marcus graduated college. Marcus had just finished his 2nd year of college on a partial scholarship, studying electrical engineering. He was the first person in his family to make it that far. Diane would call him every Sunday evening, and every week her voice carried the same quiet pride. The kind of pride that doesn't need to announce itself because it fills the whole room anyway. Then, during the summer between his sophomore and junior year, Marcus started feeling tired, not normal tired. Bone tired, the kind of exhaustion that doesn't go away with sleep. He ignored it for weeks, the way young men do. By August, he couldn't ignore it anymore. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday, acute leukemia. He was 22 years old. When Diane got the call, she sat down on the kitchen floor. Not the couch, not a chair, the floor. She stayed there for a few minutes alone, then she stood up, washed her face, and drove to the hospital. Over the next 18 months, Diane Webb did what mothers do when the world gives them no other choice. She fought. She fought the insurance company when they denied claims. She fought the hospital billing department for payment plans. She sold her car and took the bus. She sold her furniture piece by piece, living with a mattress on the floor and a single folding chair. And one morning, she opened that velvet box, took out every gold bangle her mother had given her, and drove to a pawn shop. She got $400 for jewelry that had been in her family for 3 generations. She didn't cry. She took the money and paid for Marcus's medication that month. Marcus didn't know the full extent of what his mother had done. He knew she was struggling. He could see it in her face when she visited. But Diane made sure he never knew how empty that house had become, because she said, and this is a direct quote from the woman herself, he needed to focus on getting better, not on me. Treatment for acute leukemia is not a single event. It is a long, brutal marathon of chemotherapy cycles, hospital stays, blood transfusions, and waiting. Always waiting. Marcus went through 3 rounds of chemotherapy over 14 months. He lost weight. He lost his hair. There were 2 nights when the doctors genuinely were not sure he would make it to morning. Diane slept in the hospital waiting room on those nights. A nurse brought her a blanket. She sat in a plastic chair with that blanket pulled around her shoulders and prayed out loud, quietly, to herself, until the sun came up. The bills kept coming. Medical debt in America does not take a pause for grief. Diane had already exhausted her savings, sold everything of value, and borrowed from her church community. She was behind on rent. Her landlord, to his credit, gave her extra time, but there was a limit to how long he could wait. She knew she was running out of road. One afternoon, Diane went to the hospital pharmacy to pick up Marcus's medication. She handed over her insurance card and waited. The pharmacist came back and told her, quietly but firmly, that the insurance had denied the latest claim and the out-of-pocket cost for the prescription was $1,300. Diane had $47 in her account. She stood at that pharmacy counter and did not move for almost a full minute. The person behind her shifted impatiently. The pharmacist looked at her with pity that somehow made it worse. Finally, Diane said, very calmly, "Can you hold it for 24 hours?" The pharmacist said yes. Diane walked out of the hospital, sat in a bus shelter, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, she cried. Not because she was defeated, but because she had finally reached the end of what one person could carry alone. Marcus was not passive in all of this. Even from his hospital bed, even during his worst treatment weeks, he was studying. He had his laptop propped on his knees during infusions, watching lectures, keeping up with his coursework as best he could. His professors had been extraordinary. They gave him extensions, recorded sessions, and checked in on him personally. He also began watching Family Feud. Not as entertainment, really. More as company, something to fill the quiet hours in a hospital room. He watched episode after episode. And somewhere in those weeks, a thought began forming. If he could get on that show, if his family could compete, maybe they could win enough to give his mother some breathing room. He mentioned it to Diane on a Sunday call. She laughed, a real laugh, the first one in months. Then she said, "Let's apply." They applied as a family: Marcus, his mother Diane, his aunt Patricia, his cousin Deshawn, and his college roommate and closest friend Terrence. The casting process took 4 months. There were video submissions, phone interviews, and a callback. When the letter of confirmation arrived, Diane read it 3 times before she believed it was real. By the time they were scheduled to appear, Marcus had been declared in remission. Not cured. Remission. The cancer was no longer actively spreading, but the treatment had not fully ended, and the debt it had created was still very real. The family came to the taping carrying 2 years of exhaustion, joy, and the particular kind of hope that only people who have been through something terrible know how to carry. Marcus prepared obsessively. He studied survey data patterns, memorized the most common answers to hundreds of Family Feud question categories, and drilled with his family every night for 6 weeks. His mother watched him work with the same focused expression she had worn at that pharmacy counter. Calm on the outside, everything on the inside. The Webb family arrived at the Family Feud studio on a Tuesday morning. Marcus was wearing a dark blue suit that Terrence had lent him. Diane was wearing a white blouse and a single gold chain, the only piece of jewelry she had left. She touched it once before they walked through the studio doors. They played hard. Every single family member gave everything they had. The energy was infectious, and the audience could feel that something was different about this family. There was a sharpness to them, a focus that went beyond wanting to win a game show. They won the main game by a decisive margin. Now it was time for fast money. Marcus would go first. His Aunt Patricia would go second, isolated backstage with headphones on so she couldn't hear his answers. Steve Harvey approached Marcus at the podium with his usual ease, that big warm smile, that voice that somehow makes a game show feel like a conversation between friends. "Marcus, you ready for this?" Marcus looked at his mother in the front row. Diane was sitting perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap, watching her son with an expression that was equal parts love and steel. "More than you know, Mr. Harvey," Marcus said. The perfect round the clock started. Steve moved through the 5 questions with the practiced rhythm of someone who has done this thousands of times. Marcus answered without hesitation, clean, clear, confident. When the buzzer sounded, the audience was already leaning forward. Then came the reveal. First answer number 1. Second answer number 1. By the 3rd consecutive top answer, Steve's eyes had gone wide and the audience was on its feet. The 4th answer landed and the studio erupted. Steve put his hand on his chest like he needed to steady himself. "Young man," Steve said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper, "do you understand what you're doing right now?" Marcus didn't answer. His jaw was tight. His eyes were closed. He was still competing in his mind, still holding the whole thing together with sheer will. Patricia came out for her turn and added 47 more points. When the final tally was announced, a combined fast money score that broke the show's single-day record, the studio went silent for one long beat before it exploded into chaos. People were hugging strangers. The production crew was clapping. Steve Harvey stood at center stage with both hands pressed to his face. The Webb family had won $25,000. Marcus walked to the center of the stage. He was not celebrating. He was walking directly toward Steve Harvey with the kind of purpose you cannot fake. Steve met him halfway. "Mr. Harvey," Marcus said, "I need to tell you something. I need to tell you why we're really here." Steve nodded. The audience quieted instantly. Something in Marcus's voice told everyone to listen. Marcus spoke for the next several minutes. He told them about the leukemia. He told them about the 18 months of treatment. And then he told them about his mother. He told them about the furniture, the car, the pawn shop, the gold bangles that had belonged to his grandmother and his great-grandmother, traded for $400 to pay for 1 month of medication. "My mother sold everything she had," Marcus said. "Everything. And she never told me how bad it got because she didn't want me to give up. She just kept showing up at that hospital with a smile on her face and food she had cooked in a kitchen with no table and no chairs." He stopped. He couldn't continue for a moment. Steve Harvey was not saying anything. He was standing very still, looking at Marcus, and the cameras caught what every viewer at home would later describe as the moment Steve Harvey lost his composure completely. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet, honest way of a man who has just heard something true. Steve turned slowly to the audience. "Diane Webb," he said, "will you come up here, please?" Diane stood up from her seat with the same quiet dignity she had brought to everything else in this story. She walked to the stage. Marcus took her hands. They stood there together, and the audience, all 200 people, rose to their feet without being asked. Steve spoke directly to Diane. His voice was thick but steady. "Mom, I have met a lot of people on this stage, a lot of families, and I want you to know that what your son just told us, what you did for that boy, that is not a small thing. That is not a normal thing. That is the kind of love that changes a person just by hearing about it." He paused. Then he made a decision. "I'm going to make a promise right now, on national television. We are going to tell your story. And I personally am going to make some calls, because $25,000 is a start. But your family deserves more than a start." The audience erupted again. Diane held her son's hand and looked at Steve Harvey and said, simply, "Thank you for seeing us." Steve shook his head. "No, ma'am. Thank you for showing up." When the episode aired 3 weeks later, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The clip of Marcus's fast money round went viral within hours of broadcast, not because of the record score, though that was remarkable, but because of what came after. The 2 minutes of Marcus standing at that podium telling his mother's story was shared millions of times in the first 48 hours. A fundraising page that a family friend had quietly set up received over $180,000 in donations within the first week. People from every state in the country contributed. A retired nurse in Ohio sent a handwritten check for $50 and a note that said simply, "For Diane." A college student who had lost his own mother to illness sent $20 and wrote, "I know what it cost her. I just want her to know someone understands." The comments on the video were thousands deep. Veterans, teachers, parents, grandparents, all writing about their own mothers, their own families, the times someone had sacrificed everything and never said a word about it. Steve Harvey made good on his word. Through his foundation and with the help of several partners, he arranged for the Webb family's remaining medical debt, which stood at just over $60,000, to be paid in full. He did not announce this with fanfare. There was no press release. Diane got a phone call from a hospital administrator informing her that her account had been settled. She sat down on the floor again, but this time it was relief. Steve visited the Webb family in Memphis 2 months after the episode aired. He brought no cameras, no production crew, just himself and a few members of his team. He sat in Diane's kitchen. She had bought a small table and 2 chairs with some of the donated funds, and ate the chicken she cooked. He later said in an interview that it was the best meal he had ever had, not because of the food, but because of what it meant that there was a table to sit at again. Marcus returned to college that fall. His leukemia remained in remission. He finished his engineering degree and graduated 2 years later, walking across that stage in a cap and gown while Diane sat in the front row of the audience wearing a new set of gold bangles, a gift from Steve Harvey's team, who had tracked down a jeweler in Memphis who worked in the same traditional style as the ones she had sold. She cried when she opened the box. She cried again when Marcus put one on her wrist at the graduation ceremony. The photo of that moment, a mother and her son, her wrist raised, both of them laughing and crying at the same time, became one of the most shared images of that year. Marcus did not forget what his family had been through. In his senior year, he founded a small campus organization that helped students navigate medical debt and insurance appeals. The exact labyrinth his mother had survived alone. The organization grew quickly. By the time he graduated, it had helped over 200 students and their families. In an interview a year after the Family Feud episode, Diane was asked what she wanted people to take away from her family's story. She thought about it for a long moment before she answered. "I don't want people to see me as someone special," she said. "What I did, any mother would do that. Any good parent would do that. What I want people to see is that we should not be in a position where a mother has to sell her grandmother's jewelry to keep her child alive. That's what I want people to think about." It was a quiet but powerful statement that sparked a larger conversation, in op-eds, in church halls, in living rooms across the country, about family, sacrifice, healthcare, and the particular invisible burden that parents in crisis carry alone because they do not want their children to worry. Steve Harvey, in a later episode of his talk show, addressed it directly. Diane Webb did not ask for sympathy. She did not go on that show to tell her story. Her son told it because he needed the world to know what his mother was, and what she is a hero. Not the kind with a cape, the kind with a bus pass and an empty velvet box and a smile she put on every single morning so her son could keep fighting. The impact of the Webb family's story extended well beyond their own lives. Family Feud saw a significant increase in applications from families carrying hidden burdens, caregivers, parents of children with illness, people who had been quietly surviving something enormous. The producers noted that the nature of the conversations happening on stage changed in the months that followed. Families were more open, more real. A documentary filmmaker reached out to Diane and Marcus 18 months after the episode. The resulting short film, which followed their lives from the hospital room through Marcus's graduation, screened at 3 film festivals and won an audience award. In the film's final scene, Diane is back in her kitchen, a fuller kitchen now, with a proper table and 4 chairs, making soup. The camera stays on her hands as she stirs the pot, and she talks about her own mother, who had given her those bangles and told her that gold could always be replaced, but family could not. She was right, Diane says, not looking at the camera. She was completely right. 3 years after that Thursday afternoon in the Family Feud studio, Marcus Webb works as an electrical engineer at a firm in Nashville. He still runs the medical debt support organization he founded in college. Now as a registered nonprofit with paid staff, Diane has retired from both of her jobs. She volunteers twice a week at the hospital where Marcus was treated, sitting with families in the same waiting room where she once spent the night in a plastic chair with a borrowed blanket. She says she does it because she remembers what it felt like to be the person sitting alone in that room, and she wants to make sure no one sits alone if she can help it. Steve Harvey still talks about the Webb family. In his autobiography, he devoted an entire section to Diane, describing her as one of the people who changed the way he thought about his platform and his responsibility to the families who step in front of his cameras. He wrote, "I have been in rooms with presidents and celebrities and billionaires. Diane Webb is the most impressive person I have ever met, because she did the hardest thing a human being can do. She gave everything she had, and she kept smiling so someone else wouldn't have to be afraid. The gold bangles are back on her wrist now. She wears them every day. Some stories remind us what really matters. Diane Webb did not need cameras or applause or a viral moment to be who she is. She was already that person. Quietly, stubbornly, completely, long before anyone was watching. Her story is proof that love doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it looks like an empty velvet box, and a bus pass, and a mother walking into a hospital room every morning wearing a smile she had to build from scratch. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your life who has quietly sacrificed everything, share it. Let the people around you know that those acts of love are seen, they are valued, and they deserve to be talked about. And if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Stories like Diane and Marcus's are why we do this. There are more of them, real, extraordinary, human stories, waiting for you here every week. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss one. Because sometimes, all a person needs to keep going is to know that someone out there is paying attention.